Assalamu alaikum everyone. I hope you guys are doing good.
I
This
think
is
we should.
me, Abu Bakr Dalavar. I welcome you all to this LinkedIn Live as we always do LinkedIn Lives with our very own founders so that you can learn from their stories, from their journey and from their experiences, right? So today we have very amazing founder with us. Without further ado, let me introduce her. She's our founder from our first cohort, and she's been doing really amazing work in the field of agriculture and development. Please welcome Khunsa Khawar, the founder of Farmers Academy. How are you, Khunsa?
I'm very well. Thank you, Bubakar. Thank you for having me.
That's really glad. I'm really glad. So today we have also a very amazing topic, and I guess most of our audience, as most of NICF's audience is more founders or people who want to be entrepreneurs. So I think without the further ado, let me ask you the real question. Let's be honest. Are most startups in Pakistan actually solving real problems or just copying the trends?
Without delaying this any further, I would first need a thumbs up from you, Abu Bakar. Am I audible enough? Clarity के
Yes,
साथ आप मुझे सुन सकते हैं या नहीं?
yes, you are audible.
Okay. Thank you so much. So first thing first, thank you for having me here. This feels like an amazing platform to be back at. We have been pitching a lot. अपने NICF के दौर में तो हमने बहुत pitch decks और hot seats किए हैं. So it feels the same. The nostalgia is really hard. I'm happy to be here. And yeah, my name is Khunsa Khawar, and my startup called Farming Development Academy was incubated at National Incubation Center, Faisalabad, and I was the member of the graduate or the graduate of the very first cohort that was incubated at the center, and it was a tremendous and incremental learning experience since then. Coming back to the question, which was about startups and the ideas that are either solving real problems or just copying trends. So I believe, Abu Bakr, if I have to be very honest with you, then I would rather say that a lot of us are just copying trends. And that's not because we do not have ideas, but because we are very unsure and we always want to play it safe. It's more like, we see something which is doing great, like, let's say a e-commerce platform, or maybe a food delivery business model or a fintech, and it feels easier to build something which is which is familiar, which is similar, instead of sitting with a problem which is very messy, which is very unclear. And I think the issue with that is we only copy what we see on the surface and not the context behind it, the bigger picture, the background. And this is something that I would say I've learned from my own experience while I was building FDA, that what works somewhere else comes with an infrastructure, it comes with a trust system, it comes with a user behavior that we do not fully have here, that I might not have here with myself or with my startup. And when I was working on Farming Development Academy at NICF, the idea sounded very strong on paper. Enabling farmers and educating them and empowering them digitally sounded something that should work. But when I actually went out into the market, when I actually interacted with the farmers themselves, I understood and I realized that a farmer doesn't learn the way I assumed that he would. Their relationship or their trust with the screen is not what I assumed that it would be. And a farmer relies a lot more on their own relationships, their own experiences, and their networks. So I believe that the gap is not in the idea itself, but it is in how deeply we understand the problem before we try to solve it. And also, there's a learning curve from my own experience. We really need to understand and then accept if the problem is just a problem in our own head. हमें सिर्फ ये लग रहा है कि ये एक इशू है लोगों का, ये यूजर्स का, बट क्या वाकयातन वो हमारे यूजर्स की या हमारे कंज्यूमर्स की एक सफरिंग है, एक पेन पॉइंट है भी या नहीं, सिर्फ हमें लग रहा है या ये प्रैक्टिकली एग्जिस्ट भी करता है या नहीं. So I think that's my take on that.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. But here, as like a very person who's very involved into the startup ecosystem globally, I would say there is no big problem in copying, because if we see like overall trends globally, people copy startups and then they basically improvise it. And I wanted to ask you, as if we see like
Exactly.
some people are copying some startup that might have worked in US, but if we see Pakistan's dynamics are very, very
Hmm.
different. Right? And I wanted to
Exactly.
ask you, because you have built the startup in this country, so I wanted to ask you, what are the realities of Pakistan that founders should have keep in their mind before starting any startup?
This again comes from my own learning, and I think the biggest thing we ignore is that people do not behave logically in the way we expect them to, unfortunately. We
Okay.
assume that if something is useful, people will adopt it. But fortunately or unfortunately, this is a debate for another day. This is not how decisions are made here. In Pakistan, decisions are based on trust, they are based on habits, and how much risk is someone willing to take. And people might agree with you. They might say that this is, oh my God, this is a great idea, this is doable. But when it actually comes to using it or paying for it, they hesitate. They tend to step back. And that hesitation is not irrational, I would rather say. It comes from the fact that there is very little margin for error in their lives. And I've seen this very clearly in agriculture, I would say. When you go out to the farmers, when you speak to them, they understand what you are saying. They understand what you're trying to build for them. They appreciate you even. But when it comes to changing what they have been doing for years, they go back to what feels safer, feels more nurturing, what comes to them naturally. So I think we build based on what people say instead of what they're actually comfortable doing, and that creates a big gap in adoption. लॉजिकली हमें लगता है कि ये चूंकि ऐसे ही इसकी सेंस बन रही है तो ये ऐसे ही होगा या ये ऐसा ही होना चाहिए, बट अनफॉर्चुनेटली ऐसे होता नहीं है. And people always tend to do or follow what they're comfortable following, what they're comfortable doing or adopting. तो वो जो हमारा डूइंग का और लिसनिंग का और सेइंग का एक गैप आता है ना, वो एक बिगेस्ट adoption gap है, I would say.
Exactly. Okay, so Khunsa, now I want you to ask you a very, very important question, and I think I have seen this most of the startups struggle here at NICF, and I really want to know the reason behind it. So we have seen most of the startups survive to sustain even after getting some traction or some customers. So I wanted to know what's the real reason behind it.
Sure. I personally think, Abu Bakr, that we confuse attention with value. And I personally think that getting users is not the hardest thing in Pakistan, because generally our people are they're very curious and they always want to try something new. But the real challenge is staying, trusting, and paying, which is a completely different thing altogether. And I've seen this, and I've done this myself, that we tend to celebrate numbers like downloads and signups very early on, but we do not ask ourselves whether these users actually care about what we are building. And will they come back without being reminded? Will they pay for it? And would it actually matter to them if it disappeared tomorrow? If we are not functional anymore, from let's say tomorrow onwards, would they actually care? And I think I can speak on this from my own learning experience, that what we are missing is patience and a clear understanding of value. We want growth very quickly, and that pressure is real, and it's pretty understandable, especially when funding is involved. But in a market like Pakistan, trust takes time, and behavior change also takes time. So a lot of startups now, they grow on the surface, but underneath there is no strong reason for users to stay. And it eventually starts to follow. It eventually starts to show up. So I believe that building something, creating something which is consistent, which has a clarity, which has an understanding, which offer value rather than just getting users on board or just getting signups and likes and shares and this and that. Instead of chasing those, we should actually build and work on the hook, and work on the hook consistently, so that even if you are there, even if you disappear some way or someday, it actually creates a void, or it actually matters to the life of your consumer. So I think this is something that I've learned from my own experience while I was working on FTA, and this is again my take on this very concept of why startups actually struggle when they have users on board, and this is the missing part of it, the patience and a clear understanding of the value, I believe.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. So I also, as like in last few years, government and also there's a lot of awareness about entrepreneurship, and now we've been seeing this good trend that everybody want to do a startup, and at even NICF we hear from a lot of even young founders that are very passionate about doing something of their own, innovating something, but at some point they are failed to execute their idea or execute their vision. So what do you think, is it discipline or is it clarity that we lack, that why we fail in executing anything?
Yeah, no, this is a very important question, I would rather say, and this is actually the crux of our conversation today. I personally think, Abu Bakr, that it is less about skill, it is more about clarity and consistency. I think that we are very good at thinking, we are very smart at planning, even pitching. हमने वो अपना सारा पीछे जो हमारे shows भी हुए हैं pitching को लेके और platforms को लेके और opportunities को लेके, हम pitching में भी बहुत अच्छे हैं. But I believe execution here is not clean and it is not predictable, I would rather say. Things, they often do not happen on time, people do not respond, and systems are not always in place. So you end up spending a lot of time following up, just running after people, just running after, paperwork and documentation, adjusting and dealing with small operational issues that are not very exciting, to be honest. And I think that what happened is people lose momentum because this kind of work is repetitive and sometimes frustrating. It happened to me. It happened to many of my friends. We are just, we become frustrated and we are like, we can't do it any further. But here's the real challenge. Here's the real trick. And here's the real, I would say, the ground that building here requires you to keep going even when things are slow and unstructured. उस सारे chaos में, उस सारी messiness में भी, you just have to keep going and navigate your path through it. It is not about doing things perfectly, because the person that I am, I always used to chase perfectionism, end to end, start to end, detail oriented जो हैं वो बहुत ship shape होने चाहिए. But this is also learning from myself that it's not about perfection all the time. It is not about doing things perfectly all the time. It is about continuing despite delays and uncertainty. And I think that many founders, they're not fully prepared for how messy execution actually is in this environment. और जितना हम चीज़ों को certain और predictable बना के चलते हैं और या चलना चाहते हैं, unfortunately उस तरह से काम होता नहीं है. So and I think that is the real challenge here. Clarity कमी होना, consistency की कमी होना और बहुत जल्दी चीज़ों को जो है अपने हिसाब से take over करना या grow करना, ये एक real challenge है which actually turns, मैं ये भी नहीं कहूँगी कि उसमें execution weak होती है. उसमें मुझे लगता है कि जिस तरह से हम pivot कर रहे होते हैं, I think वहाँ पे अगर थोड़ा सा हम ध्यान दे लें या काम कर लें उस area के अंदर, तो I think we can create wonders.
Exactly. And according to me, founders' biggest problem is also that they don't want to hear the truth as well. Sometimes
Exactly.
they want to live into their like own version of the story. But I want you to answer that. What's the biggest truth that startup founders had to listen?
Yeah. Okay. So I don't think so, even if I'm the right person to answer this, because I am notorious for being strong headed. And I mean, एक वो वाला जो एक बंदा होता है जिससे जो करना होता है बस उससे वही करना होता है. I'm notorious for that. I don't know if it's a good thing or not, or a bad thing, but yeah. So when I was building FTA, मेरा अपना जर्नी भी बहुत सारे इन unwanted truths से I think it was bombarded with those. There are a lot of people who tell you otherwise. There are a lot of people who tell you that this idea is great, but then there are others जो कि उसकी functionality के ऊपर या उसके momentum के ऊपर या उसकी feasibility के ऊपर question करते हैं और आप at times you're defensive, at times you're open to their criticism. So I think being a founder and also an early founder, if you're an early entrepreneur or a beginner, just starting your journey, तो ये एक ऐसा I would say dilemma है जिसको बहुत strategically आपको navigate करना है, because not everyone is questioning your choices or your decisions just for the sake of it. कुछ जो है वो genuinely आपको mentor करते हैं या करते हैं, और कुछ होते हैं जो कि सिर्फ they just want to pull you down. So I think a hard truth that might would be is that your idea on its own is not enough, just like that. Or sometimes the timing is not in your favor. ऐसा भी होता है. This is something that I've also witnessed. You can have something that genuinely solves a problem and makes sense, but if the ecosystem, the funding environment, or the user readiness is not there, it becomes very difficult to sustain it. And this is something that we really need to make peace with. इसमें कोई इसमें आई थिंक कोई हमारी कैपेसिटी को या हमारी क्रेडिबिलिटी को या हमारी अंडरस्टैंडिंग को जज या क्वेश्चन नहीं कर रहा है. दीज आर जस्ट अनफेवरेबल सर्कमस्टांसेस दैट वी रियली नीड टू look into for our own sanity. And I often think that we are often told to believe in our vision and keep going, जो कि बहुत सारी circumstances में ऐसा भी होता है कि आपको नजर भी आ रहा है कि जी ये चीज नहीं हो रही है, ये डूएबल नहीं है, इसकी फिजिबिलिटी नहीं है, इसकी कोई ट्रैक्शन नहीं है, but even then there are support systems and then their friends and family who just want you to keep going and keep working, which is important, which is actually equally very important. But here's the trick: belief does not remove structural challenges, and this is something that we really need to understand. I have personally felt this while trying to build something that I knew had value, but the support systems around it were not strong enough. So the reality is that you really need alignment between your idea, the timing, and the environment, all three at a time. And that is not always in your control. तो बहुत सारी चीज़ें जो हैं वो हमें वॉलंटरली गिव अप करनी पड़ती हैं, बहुत सारी चीज़ें जो हैं वो हमें अंडर कंट्रोल इन कंट्रोल लेनी पड़ती हैं. एंड आई थिंक कि अगर एनवायरनमेंट, अगर सपोर्ट सिस्टम या टाइमिंग आपके फेवर में नहीं है, तो यू नीड टू अंडरस्टैंड व्हेन इज द टाइम टू put up the battle, when is the time to put the guards down.
Yeah, exactly. That's very true. So now I wanted to ask you, as you were also the founder yourself and you have been through this journey, but most of the startup founders think that funding is their biggest problem. No doubt, which is a big problem as well. But if we keep the funding aside, what do you think? What is the biggest problem that fails startups at early stage?
Tell me about it. This is one of my, ये जो वो दुखती रग हम जिसको कहते हैं ना, this is that for me. But from what I've seen over the years, it is usually the founder losing energy slowly over time. And I don't know if many people make sense to it or agree to it or resonate to it, but I personally think कि जब आप over the time खुद अपना momentum lose कर देते हैं, खुद अपनी एनर्जी लूज कर देते हैं, खुद अपना स्पार्क लूज कर देते हैं, इवेंचुअली जिस चीज को आप चेस कर रहे होते हैं वो भी फिर इट डजंट एग्जिस्ट इन द फर्स्ट प्लेस. नॉट इन ड्रामेटिक वे ऑफ कोर्स, बट वेरी ग्रेजुअली. बहुत सबकॉन्शियसली आप उसमें से पुल आउट हो जाते हैं, एंड यू स्टार्ट विद अ लॉट ऑफ एक्साइटमेंट, लाइक आई स्टार्टेड विद अ लॉट ऑफ एक्साइटमेंट, but then things get delayed, people do not follow through, money is uncertain, and over time that starts affecting how consistently you show up. And also the second thing is lack of focus, because we try to do too many things at once, hoping something will work. और ये भी मुझे लगता है कि एक बहुत बड़ा challenge है, एक बहुत बड़ा this is again a huge mistake. Instead of doing one thing properly, we spread ourselves too thin. And I would say the third is losing touch with reality. again, this happened to me. Many चीज learn की और फिर unlearn की है. You have to be in touch with your reality. You have to be grounded. You have to see your base, where you're coming from. And if you are not constantly talking to your users, you are not understanding how they actually behave, you start building based on assumptions. और मुझे लगता है कि in Pakistan, the gap between assumption and reality becomes very aggressive. It becomes very expensive very quickly. So, to culminate this overall answer of mine, I would rather say that instead of putting all your, instead of going very diverse, very broad, और आप बहुत ज़्यादा अपने आप को फैला लें, बहुत ज़्यादा expand कर दें, I would rather say that put all your efforts into one thing, build it, scale it, और फिर आप उसके ऊपर capitalize करें. So I think ये एक चीज़ जो है ना कि अगर फंडिंग का इशू नहीं है तो फिर आपका अपना focus, आपका अपना that hunger of doing so many all at once, and you losing your own energy over the time. This is something that's a problem for many startups here.
That's very very true. Thank you so much, Khunsa, for coming to this LinkedIn Live today. To be honest, I have learned a lot from our conversation today, like what actually the problem here and why actually startups fail in their early stage. And at NICF, we are basically providing them an whole program which most of the time solve their problems, but we are also learning and evolving this ecosystem as we could be more beneficial towards the startups. Thank you so much guys for listening to our LinkedIn Live today, and I hope you learned a lot from today's conversation. And khayal rakhein. Allah hafiz.
Allah Hafiz. Thank you.